And I was just like, blah, 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 blah. Just, I don't know what I'm doing. I just like stumble and fumble through life. What are you gonna do? It's so cringeworthy. Okay, sorry for the shaky tripod. Ren keeps like jiggling it basically, but you know, that's life with kids. Anyway, here's a fun one. I've never been drunk in my life. That doesn't mean that I haven't had alcohol, but I have never been drunk. I, as a kid, saw people drunk and saw how it made them act and feel, and then I became health conscious at like, you know, whenever I went vegan, basically when I was like 16, and so there were like several reasons for me not to be interested in it at all. And I am 30 now, and I didn't have my first sip, like single sip taste of liquor until I was 23. It was on my 23rd birthday, and I was actually living in Mexico at the time, and they gave me a free birthday margarita, and it was like basically in the state where tequila is made and like where it came from. So I was like, okay, I'll taste it, sure, whatever. I had like half of a birthday margarita and then tea, drank the rest. I'm just not interested. It seems like it makes you like sloppy and falling on yourself and throwing up, like feeling nauseous. Okay, if we want to talk about another phobia, nausea. I am terrified to be nauseous. It's the worst feeling ever. I don't get nauseous often, but I just remember that feeling, and it's just so terrible. I would never, like, I feel like drinking or whatever good comes from being drunk, or like funny or silly or good feelings, happy feelings, whatever, totally would be overshadowed by being nauseous or headachy the next day. It just seems like, and it's not healthy for your body, so it's just like not worth it to me. So that said, I love hard cider, and like I'll drink like half of one bottle every now and then, just like if we're having a barbecue, or if I go out with my friends or something, then I'll have something like that. So yeah, I don't plan to get drunk anytime soon. Here's another funny thing. When I was in high school, or when me and T were in high school, we were total hippie wannabes. We would wear like the big pants, and like I have these crazy boots made from vintage tapestries that T bought for me when we were in high school, because I just loved that kind of like 1960s style and 1960s stuff so much. I actually still have, freaking obsessed with them. Anyway, I haven't worn them in literally like, I don't know, 10 years, maybe 8. No, maybe like 9 or 10 years, but I just can't let them go because T bought them for me when we were like 17. For the senior year superlative, like, you know, most popular or funniest or whatever, I was nominated to be born in the wrong decade, which, who came up with that? I got nominated for it. In the end, I didn't win because popularity contest, right? High school, a lot of people would be like, oh, that's totally you. That category was literally made for you. And I was like, I know. We were like obsessed with the Grateful Dead, and we would go to all of their shows and dress like hippies. Anyway, we love that kind of stuff, like hippie culture and folk and 60s and 70s rock, and so much that we ended up naming our first son after Bob Dylan. Obviously, our first son's name is Dylan, born in the wrong decade. Before I move on from this topic, I just want to say that I loved the Grateful Dead so much. I was like obsessed with Bob Weir, like young Bob Weir. So we would go and see his band. He was the rhythm guitarist for the Grateful Dead, and he had his own band, because obviously Jerry Garcia died in the 90s, right? So he had his own band called Rat Dog, and we would like follow them around. We went to so many of their shows at festivals and Hard Rock and things like that in Orlando. Anyway, we just made this connection with the bass player and ended up, I don't even freaking know how, like just getting to know him. We have his personal cell phone number. We would write him letters. We were invited to his house in Northern California, and we ended up getting backstage like several times. Like we got in free to all of their shows eventually. They would have backstage passes and tickets waiting for us like at will call, and we would just go backstage. So the first time I went, I'm like having such a fangirl moment for Bob Weir. The first time he got like super close to me to say like, hey, we're so happy to have you here. Like he was so stoked and just like having such a good time that night, and he was just like in a really good mood, and I was just like blah, 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 blah. And T was like, what are you doing? That's Bob Weir, say something. Whew. Anyway, that's just, I don't know what I'm doing. I just like stumble and fumble through life. What are you gonna do? Here's one that I know most people probably won't understand. Okay, so me and T are 30. Well, I'm 30 and T is 31, I think. Yeah, he's 31, and neither one of us has ever owned a cell phone, like a smartphone. We have no desire to own it. I understand and acknowledge that it probably makes some things a lot easier, like you know, getting directions or, I don't know, online shopping. I get that it makes things easier, but I think it also complicates things. Obviously, they're super freaking expensive. They create a lot of e-waste, and they're so, my issue is that they just are so dependable. And I have 4 kids, and I don't want to be distracted all the time. So like if I'm at home working on the computer, I'm distracted, you know? So when I go out with my boys to a park, I don't want to be distracted and on a phone, you know? And I feel like it's not anybody's fault. They're made for us to be addicted to them, and I don't think that I'm special. I think that if I got one, I would do that. So I'm gonna hold out as long as I can and just like stay away from the smartphone as long as I can. And on that note, I wanted to say I don't buy my kids tablets or things like that either. And no, I don't think they're missing out. No, I don't think they're gonna be computer illiterate or like not be able to handle tech. Seriously, if your 70-year-old grandmother can have a Facebook, my kids who are growing up in the technological age are gonna be just fine. They do use tablets at like their friend's house. I had 4 completely drug-free, unmedicated births with all 4 of my kids, including my twins, and they were probably my easiest birth. Birth isn't easy, but they were my least hard birth, for sure. When Dylan was a baby, me and T were super stressed out. We were living away from most of our family back in Texas, and most of our family was here in Florida, including both of our moms. And T was going to school full-time at Texas A&M, which was like an hour and a half one way away from our house. And then he would work at Starbucks at night, and he was just never home. And me and Dylan, we only had 1 vehicle, so me and Dylan were basically lonely. We were alone, and it was kind of a sad, lonely time, you know? And T was stressed because when he came home in the middle of the day in between school and work, Dylan would be napping, and he just didn't get to see his baby much, and we didn't get to see each other much. And before we had kids, we were used to being together, as I said earlier, 24/7, always together, never tired of each other. And it was just a really hard time. So we were like, screw this. We sold our car and sold everything we owned basically, and bought a van and started to renovate it. Somewhere in the middle of the renovations, we just changed gears, and we're really like apt to do that sort of thing. We just said, you know what, why don't we go to Mexico instead? So we sold that van too that we had started renovating. We were thinking like a van life thing, and this was back in 2011 or 2012. So this was kind of like right as van life was starting to become like a thing. Now it's obviously exploded, but anyway, it didn't feel right. Like somewhere in the middle, and we were like, let's just go to Mexico instead. So we moved to a little fishing and surfing village in Mexico called Sayulita in the state of Nayarit. It's about maybe a 30 or 40 minute bus ride through the jungle north of Puerto Vallarta. And we absolutely loved it. We lived in this amazing 3-story Tarzan house. It literally looked like it had like vines going up the side. It was just so cool. We had like a saltwater pool with a little waterfall, and our bedroom had AC, which is like something when you're in Mexico. And we would just walk into town, which like the main strip was right on the beach. We would just walk in and we would get iced coffee and these freaking amazing breakfast croissants with like a spicy tomato butter, and it was really fun. And they had like juice and smoothie stand and fresh coconuts, like, you know, every 100 feet. It was a really good time. We swam and we just spent a ton of time together. We just needed to like recuperate from that lonely, sad, just like depressive, brand new parents all alone sort of year that we'd had in Texas. So it was really rejuvenating. And after we had been in Mexico for a few months, we decided to come back to Florida. Our family really wanted to get to know Dylan, and I think we were just ready to be around people and be in a familiar place. So we came back, and a few months after we came back, we said, hey, let's take a trip together. Let's take a surf trip together. And we all went to Puerto Rico for 2 weeks, and that's where I got pregnant with the twins. And that is when our lives really started to change and get sort of difficult. And I'll talk more about that later, but having twins is really, it's more than just 2 babies. I mean, it's something different, and it's hard. It's really hard. For me, at least. For my family, like, I'm just gonna be honest, it's pretty much the hardest thing that has ever happened to us, the most difficult thing. And obviously we love our twins, we know that it's a special thing, but it really sort of like threw us for a loop, and we just weren't expecting it. I didn't find out I was pregnant with them. Well, I'm gonna talk more about this in another video. I'll talk more about twins because there's a lot to say. So I am not a sports fan at all. I don't like football, I don't like basketball, I don't like soccer, I don't want anything to do with any of it. But growing up, even though I wasn't a sports fan back then, I have the best and funnest memories of going to basketball games and hockey games with my dad in Dallas. He would take me to Dallas Mavericks basketball games and Dallas Stars hockey games all the time. I used to love going to those games. I think it's because he really made it fun. He enjoyed the game, so I did. You know, he'd make a big deal of like chanting and like cheering on his favorite guy and talking to the people all around him. And I think that has a lot to do with why I'm so social now, because both of my parents are super, super chatty and funny, and they make friends easily, and I'm just the same way. Maybe a little too chatty sometimes. I don't know, I like it, right? It's interesting, I keep myself company. Those are some of my favorite childhood memories. And my parents were both just super cool. Like, all my friends were jealous that I had the cool parents, you know. We were like super cultured, you know. They wouldn't like censor our movies and music too much. So I definitely censor my kids' movies a lot more than my movies were censored. Like, they don't watch things that are like scary or confusing for them, you know, like horror films or murder films or suspense, nothing like that. And they were super spontaneous. My dad, especially, when I went to work with him, he owned a car lot in Dallas when I was a kid, and we would go in and he's like, if we get 2 car payments today, mija, like, we're driving to McAllen, which was like down South Texas. Like, we're going on vacation, basically. We're gonna go to Mexico, we're gonna see our family, we're gonna party, we're gonna have barbecues, oh, we're gonna have so fun. And it would just be like 2 car payments and we're gone for 3 days, like, you know, just out of nowhere. And I'd be like, cool, yeah. Or he'd be like, all right, if we get a payment today, we're going to Six Flags, which is like a theme park. I know they're not all over the country, but they are in Dallas, and I have so many memories of just taking off and going riding roller coasters with my dad for the day. And my mom was the same way. She was that parent who's like, put your hands up, guys, we're going on a roller coaster, like, what? And we just like always had a lot of fun. So thanks, Mom and Dad, hi. Another thing is, a lot of people tell me, and this is so strange to me, that they hadn't been to their first concert until they were like 15, which is just like mind-blowing, because my mom and dad both took me to concerts. My mom was super into country music, which, so I went to a few of those country music concerts with her, and my dad took me to so many rock and roll concerts, so I probably saw a lot of, you know, like drunk people dancing and making out and stuff at a really young age, but, you know, that's life, I guess. And I'm just not afraid of that now, you know, and I'm not afraid for my kids to see like love or affection in public. I am more afraid of like violence. Anyway, so thank you guys for being awesome, fun parents and making all my friends jealous. Oh my goodness. Okay, and this is right, being a 90s kid, you'll understand. Well, if you were a 90s kid and you have kids now, it's just like we look back like, I can't believe our parents let us watch that, or oh my god, I can't believe we had, you know, like candy cigarettes. So another thing that I look back and like it's so cringeworthy is just like the food I ate. Obviously I'm here and everything's fine, and I don't fault my parents, you know, for not raising me vegan. It's like I literally am not worried about it at all. But my parents both said that my favorite foods when I was super little, like 1 basically, were Twinkies, oh, so bad, and Slim Jims, which I remember eating so many gas station Slim Jims. Like, they had that square cheese stick and like this beef jerky and like those giant pickles. Like, I used to eat so much. Anyway, my parents said that my first word was pan, which means bread in Spanish, and that's what I would call Twinkies. So they were definitely giving me Twinkies when I was like 6 months old. Like, God, guys, come on, jeez. So yeah, there's a fun fact. My first word was pan or Twinkie. Me and T used to travel a ton before we had kids. When we were younger, we would literally, when we were in college, we would skip every other semester and just spend like a ton of time in other countries. We went to like England and France and Costa Rica and Mexico and Ireland and just Italy, Greece, all these different places. And we always would be like, can we take our exam early, because, you know, tomorrow we're gonna be in Paris when you guys are taking the exam, basically. And our teachers would be like, well, I guess I have to since you already have the tickets. It's just like we always put travel first. So we went to New York City. We took a road trip up from Florida to New York City one year because we wanted to go to the Gathering of the Vibes Festival in Connecticut. And we stayed at the Chelsea Hotel because we were really into like 60s and 70s, you know, culture and music. And the Chelsea Hotel was like a thing, right? The Ramones stayed there, and just tons of different artists. So we rented a room for 2 nights at the Chelsea Hotel, and we just like walked around all night exploring this place. And I think it was our first night there. They were having a rooftop, like a private artist who had lived there, like rooftop party. But we totally snuck up onto that roof and just acted like we were like part of the party, like meant to be there. It was just like super freaking BA. We had to like climb out a window and like scale some fire ladders or something. I don't even remember. And we ended up getting kicked out after like 30 minutes, but it was like, oh, whoa, we got the view of New York City. So that is it. If you want me to elaborate on any of these things in another video, leave your comment or your question down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads. Thanks for watching.